Imagine stepping through the golden gates of Versailles in the late 1700s. Sunlight glitters on endless marble halls and crystal chandelier. Courtiers swirl in silk and powdered wigs. The air heavy with the scent of fresh cut flowers, sweet pastries, and something else, something foul, behind the layers of lace and pearls. A hidden stench weaved through every corridor. Chamber pots tucked behind velvet screens overflowed. Servants dumped waste into palace gardens, where it baked in the sun. The grandeur of Versailles was built on a foundation of rot, and no royal embodied this contradiction more than Marie Antoinette. History remembers her for decadence, towering hairstyles, extravagant gowns, diamonds worth kingdoms. But the truth was far less glamorous. While the Queen's portraits show a flawless rose-petal complexion, few mention that her private chambers were saturated with perfume to mask what her baths could not wash away. Legend says she bathed in donkey's milk, yet records hint she avoided water as much as possible, fearing it would let sickness creep through her skin. Instead, she drenched herself in musky floral fragrances, hoping to bury the stink of sweat and Versailles' filth. Peasants whispered she told them to eat cake when they had no bread. But what they really resented was this: a queen so drenched in sweet scents and silks, yet blind to the sour air of a nation decaying under her feet. So, what was the real secret behind Marie Antoinette's perfumed image? How did her obsession with masking stench turn her into the perfect villain for a starving France? Stick around to uncover the unsettling truth. And if you love digging up filthy royal secrets, hit that like button, subscribe for more hygiene horror, and tell me, would you survive the smell of Versailles? Let me know in the comments below. Beneath the sparkling mirrors and velvet drapes of Versailles lurked a truth the royal portraits never showed. The entire palace reeked like an open sewer. When King Louis XIV expanded Versailles into the grandest palace in Europe, he made sure every hall glowed with gold leaf and chandelier. But indoor plumbing? That was hardly a priority. In fact, the Sun King's court was infamous for its lack of toilets. Chamber pots were tucked behind delicate folding screens. Guests and courtiers relieved themselves in hidden corners or behind statues in the vast gardens. Servants, often overworked and underpaid, dumped these pots into the palace grounds, mixing human waste with leftover food scraps and stable refuse. In summer, the stench rose like a toxic cloud that clung to the silks and powdered wigs of everyone who passed through. It wasn't just the thousands of nobles who contributed to the palace's unique aroma. Versailles was a working court where dogs roamed freely indoors, horses were stabled nearby, and livestock was butchered on site to feed hundreds at banquets. Even the marble floors, polished to perfection, hid rotting rushes and straw that trapped filth and fleas. Perfumed satchels pinned inside clothes, and heavy layers of scented powder only made the mix more suffocating. Marie Antoinette arrived from Austria at just 14, stepping into this lavish nightmare. Though she had her own private rooms and even her Patreon retreat, she couldn't escape the reality that Versailles was built on centuries of waste. Letters from visiting ambassadors describe the need to hold handkerchiefs to their noses when passing through the palace. Foreign guests were shocked to find ladies lifting their skirts to squat behind doors because they simply had nowhere else to go. Yet, amidst this filth, the Queen's solution wasn't water. It was gallons of imported perfume. The more Versailles rotted, the stronger the scents. And behind those rose gardens and silk curtains, the stench never truly left. When the stench of Versailles became impossible to ignore, Marie Antoinette reached for her most trusted weapon, perfume, and plenty of it. While the peasants outside the palace walls scraped together stale bread, the Queen's chambers overflowed with bottles of the finest fragrances from Grasse, the perfume capital of France. Vials of rose, orange blossom, lavender, musk, and even civet, a scent derived from the glands of wild animals, were applied daily, sometimes multiple times a day. The truth was that water and soap were considered risky, even dangerous. Many nobles believed that bathing opened the skin's pores, letting in disease and bad humors. Stories of people catching chills and dying from excessive bathing spread like wildfire. And so, while her silk gowns dazzled and her hair reached the heavens in towering poofs, Marie's real cleanliness depended on how well she could drown her natural odors in sweet floral clouds. But masking the stench only made things stranger. Her elaborate hairstyles, built up with horsehair and pomade, trapped sweat and lice. Courtiers who leaned in for a whisper often caught a whiff of stale powder and the faint undercurrent of something sour. Still, appearances mattered more than the truth. If her subjects saw their queen shimmering with diamonds and wrapped in rose water, they wouldn't question what lay beneath. This obsession with smelling sweet even seeped into her royal wardrobe. She commissioned sachets of dried herbs and petals sewn into her dresses and corsets. Her gloves were soaked in scented oils. Her handkerchiefs were embroidered with sachets of violet or jasmine. No layer of silk or brocade left her skin untouched by perfume. To outsiders, it looked like divine luxury. To those close enough to know, it was desperation, a daily battle against the rotting smells Versailles bred so well. And the more she covered up, the more the people whispered, "The queen may glitter in candlelight, but she's hiding something rancid." The shimmering gowns of Marie Antoinette remain legendary. Layers of silk, embroidered lace, and priceless jewels that dazzled at every ball. But behind those glittering seams hid a secret that would make any modern royal stylist faint. These luxurious dresses were almost never truly cleaned. Back then, fine fabrics were delicate, dyes unstable, and embroidery nearly impossible to wash without destroying months of craftsmanship. So, the Queen's magnificent wardrobe, over 3,000 gowns by some accounts, was rarely laundered in the way we'd expect today. Instead, her ladies-in-waiting relied on airing gowns out on the palace balconies, or brushing off visible dirt with stiff bristles. The result? Each gown carried layers of sweat, body oils, perfume, and the faint but unmistakable scent of Versailles' stale air. Court gossip claimed that when Marie Antoinette grew fond of a particular dress, she'd wear it for days on end, letting the fabric soak in the fragrances and filth of daily court life. Underneath these elaborate layers were linen shifts and corsets, which themselves rarely met soap and water. The corsets were especially vile, tightly laced. They trapped heat and moisture against the skin, creating breeding grounds for bacteria and rashes. Powder from her hair and perfumes would dust the inner linings, sticking to sweat and becoming a paste of grime. When the queen attended grand balls, she'd change outfits multiple times in one night. But more changes didn't mean cleaner clothes, just different ones. All perfume to mask what couldn't be scrubbed away. The more elaborate the dress, the heavier it got, sealing in warmth and odor like a portable greenhouse. Visitors sometimes described the queen's chambers as a garden of roses laid over a swamp. To stand too close meant catching a whiff of musky silk mixed with sweat. The smell of beauty on the surface, decay underneath. In the eyes of her people, every sequin was a sign of her excess. But hidden in each hemline was a darker truth. All that wealth couldn't buy real cleanliness, only the illusion of it. For centuries, the line, "Let them eat cake," has clung to Marie Antoinette like a bitter perfume. It painted her as the ultimate out-of-touch queen, one who couldn't smell the decay of her own kingdom through the clouds of her rosewater baths. But was it true? Historians now agree she likely never uttered those infamous words. The phrase appeared in print years before she even arrived in France. Yet to the starving masses, the rumor stuck like the stench at Versailles. By the late 1700s, France was rotting from the inside out. Bad harvests, brutal winters, and a deeply unfair tax system forced peasants to spend over half their income just to buy bread, when they could find it at all. Meanwhile, inside the gilded palace, Marie Antoinette seemed to drift further into luxury. Elaborate hairpieces rose feet above her head. She imported fine fabrics from across Europe and threw masquerade balls that glittered with diamonds and silk. To a peasant trudging through muddy streets, the stories of the queen's silk gowns and rivers of perfume were an outrage. Some wrote that while mothers scraped mold off crumbs to feed their children, Marie dined on candied fruits and pastries, her breath scented with sugared violets. Inside her perfume chambers, she was known to spend hours choosing which scent would mask Versailles' stink for the day. All the while, word spread that the queen didn't just ignore the suffering, she mocked it. Whether she truly said, "Let them eat cake" or not, the image stuck. A queen who draped herself in roses to hide the rot beneath her silks. The truth was more complicated. Marie did donate to charities, funded hospitals, and even visited poor families to give alms. But no amount of good deeds could wash away the anger of a hungry nation when their so-called Madame Deficit seemed to live in a bubble of sweet scents and gold. In the end, it wasn't just politics that sealed her fate. It was the smell of injustice that even her finest perfumes couldn't hide. By the time the angry crowd stormed Versailles, the queen's reputation already smelled worse than the palace gardens ever did. Whispers of her decadent perfumes, endless gowns, and supposed indifference to the starving poor had turned Marie Antoinette into the perfect villain for a country ready to tear down its monarchy. Inside her gilded prison, the queen who once drenched herself in violet and rosewater now had no more silk screens or velvet cushions to hide behind. She was moved from Versailles to the grim stone walls of the conciergerie prison in Paris, a place where the scent of sewage and unwashed bodies replaced her designer fragrances. Her silks were taken away, her elaborate wigs stripped from her head, and her perfume gloves confiscated. All the furrow clouds she'd used for so long to cover the stench of royal life were gone. Instead of courtiers fussing over which scent to brush into her hair, she now slept on straw that smelled of mildew and damp. She had no privacy. Guards watched her at all hours, even as she tried to bathe or relieve herself in a cold, foul-smelling cell. In the end, the so-called Queen of Perfume faced her final days in the very filth she had spent a lifetime trying to mask. Yet, for all the rumors of her excess, Marie Antoinette faced the guillotine with a strange kind of dignity. On her way to her execution, she stepped on her executioner's foot, and her final words were an apology for a clumsy mistake. There was no more rose water to cover the scent of fear, no more sachets of lavender to tuck inside her corset. When the blade fell on 16 October 1793, it didn't just end a royal life. It cut through layers of legend, rumor, and perfume. What was left behind was the raw truth. A young woman, married off for politics, buried under silk and flowers, who spent her final hours like any other prisoner, unwashed, exhausted, and abandoned by the luxury she once embodied. And so, Marie Antoinette's dirty secret lingers, that even the grandest perfumes can't hide the rot of injustice forever. Oh, the next time you see a painting of Marie Antoinette, remember, behind those rose gardens and rivers of perfume was a world that smelled far worse than history ever admits. Would you have survived the stench of Versailles? Or would you have traded all that silk for a single bar of soap? If you crave more filthy royal secrets and hidden truths from the past, smash that like, subscribe, and ring the bell for your next dose of hygiene horror. Drop a comment below. Which royal secret should we unmask next? Thanks for watching, and don't forget, sometimes the sweetest scents hide the darkest decay.